Blog.
So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, sponsored by the audiobook edition of Will Eisner's Spirited Life, now available on iTunes and Audible.com, and recorded live on blogtalkradio.com from the new media and, oh so briefly, American League Baseball capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. The life of young adult novelist Sara Zarr. No, she writes for young adults. She's pretty young, but she's not as young as they are. It's changed dramatically in the last 3 years, following publication of her first book, Story of a Girl. That book led her to be a finalist for the 2007 National Book Award for Young People's Literature. She didn't win, but as I told her in our first interview, the morning after the awards, she might have been better off without that first book pressure. And she never did hit a sophomore jinx. Her second work, Sweethearts, was every bit as good and clever as book number 1. Now, book number 3, that just published Once Was Lost, confirms Zarr's talents as an inventive storyteller of consistent and lasting talent. And this is a very different story than her first two. Forget about this writer taking the easy, familiar path. And this is Sara Zarr's third appearance on Mr. Media Radio, making her the first guest to return so many times. Sara, welcome back to Mr. Media.
It's so great to be here. I didn't know I was the first third-time guest. Do other people just not want to come back? You don't want to have them? They're inappropriate?
Probably a little of all. A little bit of all those things. Oh man, you got that right. How are you?
I'm really good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited that it's you being the first three-timer.
I am too, and I've always appreciated your support and that you actually read the books. That's pretty great.
Oh, was I supposed to read this book? Oh gosh, it's been sitting on my desk for weeks, and yeah, I guess that would have helped, huh? Well, okay, we can talk about something else, right? How about them Yankees this year?
Yeah, well, I do have some opinions about reality TV, so if we've run out of things to talk about, we can always move on to Project Runway or America's Next Top Model.
All right, let me make a note of that. America's. Yeah. Let me give out the. I know that you have issued a challenge to your friends and fans of your work to call into the show today. So let me give out the phone number immediately. Great. So if they want to get in, we can have them. It's 646-595-3135. Give us a call. We'll put you on the line with Sara. I will not interrupt her mid-sentence, but we'll get you on as quickly as we can. Again, 646-595-3135. So, Sara, this is a very different story, I thought, compared to Story of a Girl and Sweethearts.
Oh, good. I'm always afraid that I'm writing the same story over and over again because, to me, kind of the emotional issues are the same. So I'm always really happy when people make a comment about the books being different from each other. How did you feel it was different?
I thought it was dramatically different in, well, let's see. The setting is a teenage girl, or the protagonist, or the whatever you want to call her, is a teenage girl who's the daughter of a pastor, and right there, there are a number of elements that were in the first two books that are not there. This is not a promiscuous girl. This is not a girl who's had any abuse issues in the same way that we might think about them. And it's a very different story. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I wouldn't, and if you were wrong, I wouldn't say you were wrong live on the air.
What a friend.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I actually kind of started writing this book back in 2002, and I felt like it was really ambitious for me, and I didn't know if my skill was up to it yet. So it's one that I just kept dabbling in and setting aside. And in that way, it is different. I mean, it's kind of, there's more of a really explicit plot that's helping drive the story, and also I'm kind of tackling some fairly big questions about life and the universe, and so that was, it was a little daunting.
Well, and I read on your blog, So yes, I'm a little prepared to talk to you. But I read on your blog that this was inspired by something, ripped from the headlines, as they like to say.
Yeah, well, I'm sure most people will remember in 2002, a teenager named Elizabeth Smart was kidnapped from her home. It's interesting. Today, she's actually testifying, or it was just approved that she can testify testify about her abductor and his mental stability and his ability to stand trial because he keeps messing up the trial. But anyway, she was kidnapped from her home, and that summer I was working at a church, so I was kind of thinking about that kind of stuff, and it was really hot, and I was going through personal tumult, and I just, I would walk to work every day and see the blue ribbons people had put up for Elizabeth and just think, that's a hopeless situation. People just need to take those ribbons down. Everyone knows with stranger abductions, within 48 hours, most children are murdered, and I was just really sad. It was like just a really sad time in my life and kind of in the country's life. 9/11 wasn't that far behind us, and for Salt Lake, it was sad, and I just felt hopeless about it and just started thinking things like, what would it be like to be a teenager in that community, to be kind of observing it from the outside, and what if I were already kind of in the midst of a crisis of faith, and then there was like just tragedy piled on top of tragedy? How would that feel? And then, how do you know when to give up hope in any kind of situation, whether it's, a family situation or a relationship or, world circumstances? Is there ever a time where you just say, we just have to give up hope and close the door on that? And so those were kind of the questions I was looking at for the book.
Well, you mentioned crisis of faith. I think that may be the recurring theme from book to book, that your young female characters seem to have that issue, although I think this is the first time that it's actually gotten that close to faith as some people would identify it being, religion is
right. Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that I feel like almost every young adult novel is a crisis of faith story, because it's an identity story. It's a crisis of faith in your identity as an individual, who you thought you were growing up, who you now might become as you're transitioning into adulthood, what your family really is, what those relationships are. So yeah, you're right. In a way, that's what I mean when I say I kind of feel like I write the same story over and over. It's that quest for identity and the longing for home. And, definitely in this story, it became more directly about a kind of religious faith or a spiritual faith for this character. When Elizabeth Smart was kidnapped, she's from a Mormon community, and I just started thinking about the story in terms of being in a devout religious community and having to face directly the question, why did this happen, or how could this happen, and watching as people around her church and her family just obviously were longing for answers, to just trying to make sense of it and trying to come up with reasons for bad things happening. And I had just been thinking about that a lot, like, why do we always feel like we need to have answers or come up with a reason? And so I'm not Mormon, and I didn't want to write from a Mormon perspective and mess it all up. But I did grow up just kind of in a regular Christian church, and so I had some experience there and just transplanted the story to a fictional small town in rural Northern California, and, kind of made a small, tight-knit religious community that would work for the book, that wasn't directly related to the Elizabeth Smart story.
Well, I think the challenges of faith for a young person are the same across religious lines. You reach a certain age where you become sort of self-aware, and you're thinking about things, and you see, to use the cliche, bad things happen to good people, And if there's God and if there's religion, why would these things happen? And I think whether you're Mormon or Christian or Jewish or Muslim or take your pick. There's quite a stew out there.
I mean, even atheism is a kind of faith. I mean, you're having faith that something doesn't exist, and since you can't prove a negative, that takes a leap of faith as well. So I mean, hopefully anyone will just recognize that it's a kind of a universal question and a worldview issue that doesn't have to do with religions or denominations or anything like that. It's what am I going to take with me from the worldview that I grew up with, and now it's having to hold up in the face of real life tragedy, and then is it going to make it through that process? Is my faith in whatever going to make it through the first major challenge? And is it going to change? How's it going to look different? How's it going to be bruised by that process?
Plus, there's that whole issue that I think young people have, and adults have too. They wonder if I have doubts about all this, does that make me a bad person? If I question this, and you deal with all that.
I think doubts are really scary. I know they were for me. My family, at least my mom, was really devout, and I was very scared of doubt because my other life circumstances just felt pretty precarious, and I thought, well, the one thing that's kind of holding all this together is our religious faith and traditions, and if I started doubting that and just thinking, who am I if I don't have that, or is everything just is it like a game of Jenga where, you just pull out one piece and the whole thing collapses, and just being afraid, if I start having these doubts, am I going to hell? I mean, just really basic, raw questions like that of, can what I believe stand up to my questions about it?
Did you ever feel intimidated by the subject matter and think, I better set this aside some more. Maybe I'm not ready to deal with this?
Yes. This book was so... I hope my editor's not listening. It was a horrible, editorial process. Not horrible. It was just really difficult. Because it was really challenging material. And not only was I, attempting to address kind of the faith issues and stuff, but also constructing a plot and trying to weave those things together. And it was hard. I mean, it really pushed me in every way as a writer. And originally it was written in third person, and then my editor made a really great case for why it should be in first person. So that's like writing a whole new book. I mean, it's not like doing a find and replace in Word and replacing she with I. I mean, it really becomes a whole different thing. And yeah, I was I didn't want to come across as having answers, because I don't think that A, makes for a good story, and B, it's not true. If I don't have answers, there's no way to not have your own worldview come through your work, but I didn't want to be pat about it or trite, but at the same time just recognize that there's things about faith that are just mysterious. I mean, there's a reason it's called faith, is you're eventually making some leap about something that you can't prove or see. And, and I not to give anything away, but I didn't really want to write a loss of faith story, because I think there's a lot of good books about that, or like a clergy abuse kind of culty story. I wanted to kind of write the kind of book I would have liked to read when I was in high school and going to church and just having, here's a character with just an everyday kind of faith who kind of goes along with her family, and that's fine, and nothing's ever really come along to make her question it, and then, here's something that happens, and just kind of not coming out in the end with an answer either way, but going through that first struggle. I mean, young adult fiction is really about firsts, and so this is like a first dark night of the soul of, if the character's life is like most of our lives, there will be more of those, but this is her first.
Well, if you're just joining us, listening live, I'm talking to Sara Zarr, whose third book is just out. It's called Once Was Lost, and I know that we've got a pretty active, growing number of people in the live web chat that accompanies the interview. Sarah's going to be with us for about another 15 minutes. If you want to get in a call, now's the time, 646-595-3135. Don't be shy. I know Sarah wants you to call and say hello. Ask her a good question. And if you're following me on
Twitter and you're shy about the phone and you want to shoot me something on Twitter, I'm looking at it, so you can do that too.
There you go. You can also type in the web chat, enter a question there, and I'll be happy to ask Sarah. I'll also be happy to censor questions if I need to, because I know you've got lots of inappropriate questions for Sara Zarr because she just invites that. Don't you, Miss Zarr?
Yes, Bob.
Yes. Now, as you've matured these last couple of years...
yeah, I heard your introduction, keep saying I'm young, but getting older by the second,
Well,
39 on Saturday, so...
See, it just kind of bears up to what I'm saying. I mean, I'm thinking that, your audience is growing up a bit, even in 3 years. I mean, a 16-year-old high school girl who read Story of a Girl when it came out is in college now, or maybe married, or a parent herself. Is that affecting, who you see as reading you, or do you see that the teens are just replenishing, or are they growing older with you? What do you think is going on out there?
I don't give it much thought, I have to say. When I write a book, I'm writing it for me and whoever wants to go along with me on that particular journey, which is a word I feel is overused. I'm trying to think of a new word besides journey and process. So, but I probably won't think of it before the end of this interview. But, people don't need to stop reading young adult fiction when they turn 19 or 20. There are lots of adult readers of young adult fiction, and I think when writers get fans and they get loyal fans, those readers will keep reading your books regardless of how they age. I'm sure, Sarah Dessen has been writing young adult novels for 10 years, and I'm sure a lot of people who started out with her at 14 or 15, they're in their mid-20s now, and they still just are eager every time she has a new book out and really treasure all her books. And at the same time, you want to be picking up new readers, and that happens in the usual ways. I mean, with teen readers, it's really so much about word of mouth, of just having, reading a book and saying, oh my God, I love this book, you have to read it, and handing it to your friend and passing it along, and that's really the most powerful thing, I think, for teen readers. And then, there are the adult sort of gatekeepers in the young adult fiction world, like teachers and librarians and parents who have their ways of finding out about books and can help teens find books that way too. But I don't think about my audience being teenagers, I have to say. I just think about my audience as people who like the kind of emotional, intense story that I like to write, however old they are, and whether they're male or female.
All right. Well, Sarah, we've got a call for you. Hi, you have a comment or question for Sara Zarr?
Hello?
Hi, you're on.
Oh, that was me.
Oh, hi. Someone in area code 620. Do you have a comment or question for Sara Zarr? Oh, wait, maybe it's me. Hold on.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hi, Sarah, I just was hoping you could maybe tell everybody the story of the process that you went through to find the title for this book, because I think it's kind of a great story. And, I think that...
Is this Allie Carter?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Allie Carter. I recognize your lovely voice.
Well, I said that at first. I think maybe it didn't come through on the radio.
So this is Allie Carter. She's a fantastic New York Times bestselling author of the Gallagher Girls books.
Hi.
And Allie knows intimately the process that I went through to find this title. And I have never had so much trouble finding a title for a book as I have for this one. This book kind of ended up on a little bit of a unexpected rush publication schedule. Just that it was going to be actually in print sooner than I had thought. So my editor called me one day and said, "We're finishing the catalog copy, and we need a title for this book." And I freaked out because I did not have a title for the book. And I had a title, but I think I knew from the beginning it was not very good. It was called Home Enough, which came from a song, and the line from the song was, "I'm home enough to know I'm lost." And I love that line, but just pulling Home Enough out didn't really work as a title. And so I have a fantastic group of writer friends, and I sent them all emails and said, "Help me title my book." And one of the ideas I had was trying to find a line from a hymn, since this narrator was a pastor's daughter and she would have grown up singing church hymns. And Tara Altebrando, another great young adult author who's a titling genius, came up with this after about 5 hours of emails back and forth among all my friends, and so she gets all the credit for the title. So it's a line from Amazing Grace, which is probably the most well-known Christian hymn that there is. "I once was lost, and now I'm found," and that's where that came from.
It took me a minute when I first got the book. When I said it out loud, I went, "Oh, of course."
Yeah. I mean, it's not like an immediate flash of recognition for everybody, and hopefully it doesn't need to be to still work. So titles are hard. It's really hard.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it's easier to just write the book than to come up with a title.
Try going into nonfiction like I am and writing subtitles. The subtitles.
Oh, yeah, subtitles are bad.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that's a great one. And then a day later, no, that one sucks, Bob. Let's come up with another one. Oh, yeah. Really? How about that? No.
It's great to have a little community of writer friends who are not afraid to tell you that's terrible.
Well, Allie was so fascinated with your story, I guess because she heard before that she hung up. But, Allie, thanks for calling. We appreciate it. And that does open up the phone line, 646-595-3135. Oh, Sarah, we've got a question just came through the web chat from Reader Girl Reviews. She says, I think it's she, I don't know for sure. "Hi, Sarah. I was just wondering if you had any advice for aspiring writers or young writers who are losing their steam and wondering if writing is for them after all." And she says she is totally not talking for herself.
I'm sure. It depends on kind of what the losing your steam thing really is. If you're losing your steam because you're not getting published or you're just feeling discouraged, that's a totally natural, normal part of being a writer. And it continues even after you are published. You go through those phases of writing a book or having a new book idea, and your editor says, "We're not really excited about that. I don't think that's good for the next book." Or, just feeling unenthused in general and feeling depressed and all. That's all totally normal. Every single writer I know, even the most fantastically successful ones, go through that. So that shouldn't stop you. You just have to keep writing. If you're losing your steam for other reasons, that it's just, wow, this is really hard, and I've decided I like reading better than I like writing, and I'm just going to be a fan, and that's fine, and that's great. And you shouldn't ever feel guilty about moving on to a new dream if you just discover it's not as rewarding as you had hoped it would be. But writing it's pretty arduous work. I mean, the human brain is fantastic and great at coming up with imaginative visions of complete stories and whole worlds and feelings you want to evoke. I mean, you can almost like just get that in your head like in 2 minutes. But translating that, I mean, writing is just so much a work of translation. Translating that into language that other people can connect with and get into your vision is really, really hard work. And so I think that's one thing you just have to recognize, that just because it feels arduous for you doesn't mean that it's not working. Writing is arduous. It does not come easy for any writer. And probably writers who say that it comes easy, probably they're not very good. That's a blanket generalization. That's a blanket generalization, but I'm just guessing. People who always feel good about their writing and it's always easy and they think everything they write is great, it's probably not great. It's probably, in fact, pretty bad. So writing well is super duper hard work, and no writer I know is ever ultimately satisfied with the end result. You know, I think as we progress in our careers, we feel like we get better and better at getting that vision out of our head and doing that work of translation, but it doesn't get easier. So my advice to aspiring writers is, if you know that you want to write, then write and keep writing, and recognize that all of the, oh my God, this is so hard, and the blood, sweat, and tears, and the frustration and discouragement, that's all part of it. Like, you can't have success without that. And so you just kind of have to forge ahead. And if you just decide that you hate it and it's making you miserable, then go do something else. And then if you're called back to writing where you just feel unsettled unless you're writing, then that's a good sign. You should just keep going with it.
The person who sent that question in said that she feels unenthused, and I wrote back that maybe it was time to change topics or stories. That sometimes you start trying to force something to be a story, and it's just not there, and it's just kind of a signal that you should try something else for a while, maybe come back to it.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote 3 complete novels before Story of a Girl was published. So Story of a Girl is actually my 4th book. So, and I knew all along with each of those 3, there was something about them I didn't want to go back and work on those. And then when I wrote Story of a Girl, I felt like, well, this is going to be the one, and I really for some reason, I was willing and able to go back and rewrite it again and again and again, which was a feeling I didn't have with those first 3 books, which I suppose were just kind of practice books. Though at the time, of course, I thought those books were going to be my big entry into the world of publishing. I never would have predicted that I would just abandon those. But, you know, you do go through a process of letting go and, move on to something else.
So speaking of process, has your process changed? Are you writing in a different way, in a different place? Changed your iTunes songs, or are you having any trouble finding time? Time
is hard. The main thing that's changed is that I'm writing faster, and which is fine, and that's one thing. As you practice, you are able to write faster, at least shorten the time, whereas when you first started out, okay, maybe it takes 12 passes at this sentence to make it work. Now, I can get that down to 3 passes just from practice and just being familiar with the act of writing. But in terms of, starting a book, finishing a book, it's faster now because of my deadlines, which are not set in stone. I mean, if I absolutely said I cannot finish this in a quality way by this date, my publisher would work with me. But deadlines are good. They kind of push me to work hard. So that's changed. And then, the time, balancing the promotion of the current book. So right now, Once Was Lost is brand new, and this is my big month of promoting it and traveling and talking to Mr. Media. And the
highlight of any young writer's life, of course.
And But meanwhile, I have another book due in the not-too-distant future that I'm writing and trying to finish a solid draft of that and feeling like, gee, I need to figure out how to work on this work in progress while I'm promoting this and, maintaining my blog, staying in touch with readers via Twitter, and all of the things that I do to stay connected to readers in between books. And that's an important thing for me personally, for feeling connected and remembering what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And also it's an important thing career-wise to just, a lot of things happen in the year or year and a half between books, and you want to maintain a connection with the readers so that when your next one comes out, it's not like, oh yeah, Sara Zarr, I totally forgot that she existed. You just kind of want to be there without being obnoxious. So it's hard to balance all of that and still, protect that creative time of just shutting all that off and saying, okay, now it's just me and the new book, and I'm going to get lost in this and just let go of everything and stop criticizing myself and not be a perfectionist and protect that, mental and emotional space is probably the biggest challenge since being published. Because before, there was nothing at stake. No one knew who I was or ever cared if I wrote a book. Now that I've had a couple books out that have been reasonably popular and successful, people care. They want more books from me. I don't want to let them down. I don't want to let myself down. I don't want to have to go back to a regular job. There's all these things at stake that were not there before, so that just, increases the pressure. But as we know from fiction, having things at stake is a good thing. It just can be hard on the individual who's under all the pressure.
Yes.
So I have to work at making sure I make time that is separate from all of that other stuff, because there's two parts of the job. There's being a writer, which is kind of around inside quotation marks, being Sara Zarr on my blog with readers, promoting, etc. Then there's writing, which is really the work. So it's separating those things and making sure you don't lose the writing piece in the midst of, being a writer.
I think somebody out there probably just got a good idea for a movie. They'll call it Being Sara Zarr. You said it yourself.
Yes, I'm sure that would be a blockbuster.
Hey, do you have another couple minutes? I'd like to give your fans and readers one more shot at the phone. I see we've got a lot of people out there listening
Bob,
right now.
I have all day.
Oh, well, we won't keep you that long, but let's give you guys one more chance at a question. If you'd like to give us a call or submit it on the web chat. There you go. You heard her. Sara said, "Ask me anything." 646-595-3135. But get that call in the next few minutes. We're not going to keep her all day here, mostly because I got my own teenager to go pick up at school. Well, here's something from the web chat, actually. T.G. Seal says, "Hi, Sara. I'd enjoy hearing what authors' books or books you like to read, and also more about what you're working on next."
Okay, what I'm working on next I cannot talk about because I haven't even told my editor anything about it. And
is it okay if I tell everybody what you're working on next?
You don't know.
No.
I love to read all kinds of stuff, and I'm enjoying reading more this year than I had been the last couple of years. I found that right after I was published, reading stressed me out for some reason. I was constantly comparing myself and being super picky, and also just thinking, why did this get a good review and I got a bad review, and it's not, all that kind of crazy stuff that will lead you into a downward spiral. So it's hard for me to enjoy reading, but I've been enjoying it more this year, and there's a couple books out right now that I blurbed because I loved them so much, and one of those is called Marcello in the Real World by Francisco Stork, and I adored that book. It's kind of about a mildly autistic, kind of Asperger's syndrome boy who's 17, and his dad is a lawyer, and his dad forces him to work at the law office over the summer, and it's kind of the first time that the boy has been out in the real world dealing with what life is really like outside of the protection of his kind of school that is for people like him. So it's just fascinating because you're seeing human behavior through the eyes of this really innocent kind of character, and it doesn't make sense to him. And then when you see it through his eyes, you think, yeah, that is crazy. People are crazy. Why do we act like that? Another one that I loved was Carol Lynch Williams' The Chosen One, which is about a 14-year-old or 15-year-old escaping a polygamous compound. And that's one of those books that's also kind of ripped from the headlines and could be sensationalist, but it's really good and moving and very nuanced. I loved that. I read adult fiction, too. I'm reading a lot of Alice Munro right now, which is her short stories, which I love. And I just pulled out this, in young adult, there's this couple, Laura and Tom McNeil, who write books together, and I always forget to mention them when I'm talking about favorite authors, but I really love their books, and my favorite is probably called Zipped, which is about this boy kind of discovering that his dad may or may not be having an affair, which I think is interesting.
Interesting. That may or may not be a theme.
That may or may not be a plot element in Once Was Lost as well.
Yeah. See, I do read the books.
I know you do.
We've got another question from the web chat, and there was a caller who was on hold and then hung up. If you want to call back, I'll give you another minute or two to get that call in. Margot Lane asks, did Sarah have one teacher in school who really encouraged her writing?
I had a lot of wonderful teachers, but the name that springs to my mind is Ruth Goldhammer in 7th and 8th grade. And it wasn't so much that she encouraged my writing, it was that she encouraged reading in a certain way that no teacher I had before or since did, of just reading for pleasure, finding the books that we connected with. I don't remember exactly what her system was, but somehow that was the year I discovered Robert Cormier, and I read Lord of the Flies, and I read A Separate Peace, and I just thought, oh, man, now we're on to something here with reading. And she would, let us read whatever we wanted, and then just write a little report on a 3x5 card, no pressure. And she was just super enthusiastic, and it didn't feel like, oh, this is homework. And I think that's really important. And reading I was talking to someone today that it seems like kids now, their lives are so scheduled, there's no time to just kind of lay around and get lost in a book, or they're not interested in that. I don't know. I mean, encouraging that reading as something that's life-giving, that might be a little overwrought, but pleasurable and, an escape or a way to understand yourself or a way to feel connected, and just create that space in your mind in a way that TV doesn't do.
All right. Well, Sarah, we have another call for you.
Yeah.
Hi. Do you have a comment or question for Sarah?
Yeah, this is Julie Olson.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Sarah. I was trying to think of a good question to ask you that I think your listeners would want to know. What drove you to writing for young adults rather than adults? What was that?
Well, I don't feel like it's something I chose. It just, every time I thought of a story, it had a teenager in it, and it was set in high school. So I thought, well, I guess that's my writing voice. And I've always loved that, and that's home for me, and I'll continue to do that. But I also, the older I get, am just wanting to push myself and try new things, and I hope that I have a long career during which I get to try everything. I'm interested in screenwriting, I'm interested in writing for adults, I'm interested in creative nonfiction and memoir, and if I'm lucky, and if I do it, it's not so much lucky. If I do it, then I would love to have the opportunity to try those things, and I do. I don't know why I'm talking about it as if someone has to give me permission. I know that I have the opportunity to do those things And I just need to decide I'm going to try it and do it. So I'm hoping to stretch myself that way.
Thanks. And finding the time.
And finding the time, yeah.
Good question.
All right.
Thanks,
Good luck.
Julie.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for calling in, Julie. All right. I'm waiting for my switchboard to catch up to me. There we go. Well, Sara, I want to let everybody know that they can find your new book, Once Was Lost, as well as your 2 previous books, Story of a Girl and Sweethearts, in great bookstores everywhere, or you can order it online. Everywhere.
Seriously, if you are in Germany, Vietnam, Korea, what's the country that speaks Dutch? The Netherlands.
Okay.
My books have been translated. France, my books have been translated into those languages. So if you're listening in the middle of the night in France, you can go find Story of a Girl for sure.
There you go. See, it's out there. Find it.
Mm-hmm.
Buy it. Sarah will send me 10% for every copy that you buy. So
or
please.
request it at your public library. I, for one, when I was growing up, and probably till my late 20s, could not afford to buy books, and everything I read came from the library, and I'm a big supporter of libraries. So don't feel bad if you can't buy the book. Just go to your local library and say, hey, I want this book, and if they don't have it, they'll buy one for the system.
Hey, I almost forgot to ask you, and you'll have to answer this one quickly. It's probably a yes or no anyway. But have you given any more thought to returning to the world of Story of a Girl and writing a sequel? I'm still kind of curious where those characters are.
No.
Okay.
Well, I get asked for sequels for Sweethearts, that's for sure, more than anything. But I know that when most people who ask for a sequel, what they really want is for the book to end differently. They just want it to turn out. They want a book where it turns out the way they wanted it to turn out. So even if I wrote a sequel, they probably still would be, if they were unsatisfied with the endings, they will still be unsatisfied.
You think that's what it is? I don't think that's what it is.
Well, the characters...
I think you become attached to these characters, and they're so young, and you think, how does the rest of their lives go?
Yeah, that's true. That's probably more true for Story of a Girl than Sweethearts. I think that the Sweethearts sequel seekers really just want those 2 characters to kiss. But, the characters are really real to me, too, and I would never say, oh, no, I'll absolutely never write a sequel because I don't know. But usually I'm just so caught up in whatever my new idea is. I'm not, it's the same reason I haven't pulled out like those first 3 books that I wrote before Story of a Girl, that once I've written something, I feel like I've told that story, I've sent those characters off with forward momentum, and I've moved on. But, I never say never. Okay. Offer me enough money and I'll do anything.
Oh, okay. I'm going to make a note of that. Yeah. And folks, you can see Sara Zarr on tour in October, starting tonight with the official launch of the book at the King's English in Salt Lake City, or on October 6th at the Sycamore Plaza Barnes & Noble in Cincinnati. And, of course, for more details, you can go to sarazarr.com, or you can go to twitter.com. Right, twitter.com/Sara Zarr or facebook.com/Sara Zarr. And she's all over the place. And she's one of our favorite people and favorite guests. And Sara, it was wonderful to have you back. I'm delighted for your success because the more you succeed, the less our joint agent will bother me about getting anything done. So power to you, girl.
I doubt that. Thank you so much, Bob. It was great to talk to you again.
My pleasure. You take care and good luck this month. It'll be a good time for you.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. And folks, for more interviews with your favorite novelists, you can surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com. That's where you can listen to my earlier conversations with Monty Schultz, Peter Gollenbach, John Darnton, Sue-Ann Jafarian, James Sheehan, and many more. Please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites. Whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, TrueSlant, Blog Critics, Pointer Online, Digital Journal, Vox, Mediafly, Podfeed.net, Blueberry, Zencast, Zimbio, Current, or Odeo. Subscribe to Mr. Media on iTunes, and you'll never miss a show. Just search Mr. Media Interviews from within iTunes and subscribe for free. Or subscribe to Mr. Media's blog on the Amazon Kindle Reader. You can also listen with a piece of string and a tin can in many locations. If you've got an idea for a guest, email me directly at bob@andelman.com. That's ANDELMAN. You can also follow me on Facebook or on Twitter, www.twitter.com/Andelman. Thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate when you give up a little piece of your day and come spend it with us. Thanks for listening, everybody.